SLT Mobitel, the connection.
කොරෝනා වෛරසය 99.9% දක්වා විනාශ කිරීමට උපකාරී වන Surf Excel Hygiene Boosters.
Tonight, no fear. Health officials says high virus numbers, partly due to a PCR test blockage, while obstetrician urges expectant mothers to vaccinate without fear. Don't panic. Army commander says no plans for an island-wide lockdown while urging public to avoid stockpiling essentials. Long term. Sri Lanka and South Korea ink agreement for a $500 million loan, repayable in 40 years. In the clear, an independent anti-corruption tribunal clears former cricketer Avishka Gunawardena of all corruption charges. All that and much more coming up on First at 9. This Monday, the 10th of May, 2020.
ඇල්කොහොල් අඩංගු hand sanitizer භාවිත කරන්න. ලෙඩ රෝග ඇති කරන විෂ බීජවලට එරෙහිව සටන් කරන්න.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and welcome to First at 9. I'm Dhammike Kanayaka. Now, as concerns grow of an imminent island-wide lockdown, Army Commander General Shavindra Silva announced today that the government has no such plans at the moment and urged the public not to flock to shops and panic buy essential goods. He, however, conceded that inter-district and inter-provincial travel may be restricted depending on the need. Chief Epidemiologist Dr. Sudat Samaravira, meanwhile, is of the view that there remains no real necessity to stop travel across districts, adding that the situation can be managed with travel restrictions on higher-risk districts alone. That said, more localities were brought under isolation today, with some also being brought out of it.
As Sri Lanka's COVID-19 cases continue to rise on a daily basis, there are increasing calls for an immediate district-wide lockdown to prevent the situation from getting out of hand. With that, Minister of Education Professor G.L. Piris at a media briefing today stated that the government has not ruled out any preventive measures to contain the current virus spread, including imposing restrictions on district-wide travel if deemed necessary.
වෙන පියවර සම්බන්ධයෙන් රජයේ අවධානය පැහැදිලිව යොමු වෙලා තිබෙනවා. ග්‍රාම සේවා වසම් පොලිස් බල ප්‍රදේශ අවශ්‍ය පරිදි වසා දමලා තිබෙනවා. ඒතකොට දවස් කිහිපයකට පස්සේ තත්ත්වය හොඳ අතට හැරෙන විට ඒවා යලි විවෘත කළා තිබෙනවා. ඊට අමතරව වෙන ක්‍රියාමාර්ග ගැනත් රජය සිතා බලලා පියවර ගැනීමට සූදානම්. සංචරණ සීමා දිස්ත්‍රික්කයෙන් දිස්ත්‍රික්කයට පළාතෙන් පළාතට අවශ්‍ය පරිදි ඒවා පනවලා ක්‍රියාත්මක කිරීමට රජය සූදානම්. කිසිම ක්‍රියාමාර්ගයක් මුලදී සහ මුලින්ම අපි ප්‍රතික්ෂේප කළා නැහැ. මේ COVID-19 තත්ත්වය දිනෙන් දින වෙනස් වන තත්ත්වයක්. එම නිසා ඒ වසංගතය පාලනය කිරීම සඳහා අවශ්‍ය සියලුම පියවර ගැන සිතලා බලලා ඒ ක්‍රියාමාර්ගවලට අවතීර්ණ වීමට රජය සූදානම්.
Meanwhile, speaking on the matter, Chief Epidemiologist Dr. Sudat Samaravira stated that currently there remains no need to impose restrictions on travel across all districts, but only into and out of high-risk districts alone.
ඊයේ දවස්වලදී අපේ රටෙන් 2600කට අධික ප්‍රමාණයක් රෝගීන් වාර්තා වීමෙන් පැහැදිලි වෙන්නේ මේ රෝගය අපේ රට තුල හැම දිස්ත්‍රික්කයකම පායේ යම්කිසි ව්‍යාප්තියක් තියෙනවා. නමුත් මේ මුළු රටම එක වතාවකටම සංචරණ සීමා පැනවීමට අත්‍යවශ්‍යකමක් මේ අවස්ථාවේදී පෙනෙන්නේ නැහැ. රෝගය වැඩියෙන්ම වාර්තා වෙන ප්‍රදේශවලට අවධානය යොමු කරමින් ඒ ප්‍රදේශවල සංචරණ සීමා ඇති කරමින් අපිට තවදුරටත් මේ කළමනාකරණය කරන්න පුළුවන් කියලා අපිට හැඟෙනවා.
Meanwhile, as public concerns rise on the possibility of a lockdown, the head of the National Operations Centre for the Prevention of COVID-19, Army Commander General Shavindra Silva, called on the public not to rush to shops and panic buy essential goods, as no such decision has been taken so far. In the meantime, a total of 70 public health inspectors assigned to the Badula district called in sick today and withdrew from their duties after accusing the Ministry of Health of not having a formal plan to control the COVID-19 situation in the district. Following this, all PCR testing and transferring of infected patients to treatment centres in the district has come to a standstill. Meanwhile, more Grama Niladari divisions across the island were isolated today. In the Gampar district, the Atikehel West GN division in the Mahara police area was isolated from this morning. Further, in the Katana police area, KC De Silva GN division, Atamagahavatta village in Kadirana North and the textile village in Kadirana South were also closed off as well. Meanwhile, in the Vattala police area, the Sedavatta section of the Mahapamanugama division, 4th lane in the Kunjagahavatta division and 3rd and 7th lanes in the Nilsirigama division were also among the areas isolated today. Further, one area in the Ratnapura district, the Angamana GN division, has also been isolated as of today. In the meantime, in the Ampara district, the Navamadagama GN division, Run Helagama area in the Bakmidenia GN division, and the Serupitia GN division coming under the Dehiyattakandia police area were also isolated. In addition, the Pallannorua GN division, the Korela Ima GN division and the Kumuka West GN division in the Morakahena police area and the Narthanagala GN division in the Horana police area of the Karutara district were also placed in isolation as well. Further, the Bohitia GN division in the Monragala district was also placed under isolation this morning as well. Meanwhile, the state of isolation of 14 GN divisions in the Gampa, Karutara, Kurunagala, Ampara and Trincomalee districts have been lifted as of this morning. These include areas in the Gampa district such as the Asvennavatta East GN division in the Ulapitia and the Hidalugedera GN division in Kotadeniava. While in the Ampara district, the Kadirapura GN division, the Chandana GN division and the Dolakandia GN division in Dehiyattakandia too were removed from the isolated list. Further, in the Kurunagala district, the isolation of the Tittavelgalla GN division and the Kumbugate and Niravia GN divisions were also lifted today. Meanwhile, isolation of several areas in the Trincomalee district were also lifted, including the Ambuvalipuram GN division, Oz Hill GN division, Maduva GN division, Linganagar GN division, and the Lanka Padama and Danyagama 1 in the China Bay GN division, as well as the Samanpura and Fisheries Village and Danegame 2 areas of the Kavatikuda GN division. Further, the isolation of the Narampitia GN division in the Karutari district was also lifted today. Meanwhile, the Waqf Board of the Department of Muslim Religious and Cultural Affairs has decided to not allow Eid prayers at any mosque on the upcoming Eid ul-Fitr festival. Accordingly, all trustees and persons in charge of mosques have been instructed to keep all mosques closed on Eid day. In the meantime, a discussion was held at Temple Trees yesterday with the participation of the head of the Presidential Task Force on Economic Revival and Poverty Alleviation, Basil Rajapaksa, the subject ministers, secretaries to ministries and heads of departments to develop a mechanism to plan for the continuous distribution of essential services and consumer goods to people in isolated areas. At the meeting, special focus was placed on the supply of water, electricity, gas, fuel, personal healthcare, communications, waste management and disaster management services. Further, the officials agreed that plans must be formulated for the home delivery of essential consumer goods in collaboration with all relevant agencies, distribution networks and rural distributors, while licensing for a minimum number of mobile vendors must be planned for in accordance with health guidelines.
Now, Deputy Director General of Education, Training and Research at the Ministry of Health, Dr. Hemantha Herath, says that the high number of COVID-19 infections reported in the past few days were due to a blockage of PCR tests following the surge in COVID-19 infections. In the meantime, the Sri Lanka College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists says that it believes that the main strategy to reduce the number of deaths of expectant mothers should be through urgent inoculations, since they are exposed to high risks very much.
From Monday to Saturday last week, the island's daily caseload was over 1,800, but below 2,000. But yesterday that changed. The caseload didn't exceed 2,000, but ended up at 2,672. It is the highest number of new daily infections recorded in Sri Lanka ever since the pandemic first broke out in March last year. There were 13 imported cases, and the rest, 2,659 cases, were confirmed across all the districts in the country. The 3 districts in the Western Province continue to be the worst affected. The Colombo district reported 755 infections, the highest of any district. Gampa, meanwhile, confirmed 323 infections, while the Karutara district accounted for 234 cases. The district of Gaul reported 228 infections yesterday, while Ratnapura confirmed 192 and Kandy reported 127. There were 118 infections from Polonnaruwa, 94 from Anuradhapura and 87 from Matara. Further, 75 infections came from Matale, 52 from Kurunagala, 55 from Nuwara Eliya and 52 from Jaffna. The remaining 260 infections were reported across 12 other districts.
බලාපොරොත්තු නොවන ප්‍රමාණයේ රෝගීන් සංඛ්‍යාවක් වාර්තා වීමට හේතුවත් පහුගිය දින කිහිපය තුළ ප්‍රමාද වී තිබුණු සියලු PCR පරීක්ෂණ සම්පූර්ණයෙන් ඉවර කරලා අර තිබුණු බැක්ලොග් එක නිවැරදි කිරීම නිසා තමයි මේ සියල්ල එකතු වුණේ. නමුත් මේ රෝගීන් වැඩිවීමේ ප්‍රවණතාවය සම්පූර්ණයෙන් අඩු වීමයි කියලා අපිට කියන්න පුළුවන් කමක් නැහැ. අපිට ලැබිලා තියෙන වාර්තා වලට අනුව නම් ඒක 25000 දක්වා අපි වැඩි කරලා තියෙනවා. ඒ වාර්තා දවස් කීයකින් වගේ ලැබෙනවා. පහුගිය කාල සීමාව තුළ අනපේක්ෂිත ලෙස රෝගීන් වැඩිවීමත් එක්ක බැක්ලොග් එකක් ආවා. දැන් ඒක වළක්වලා සාම්පල් එකතු කිරීමට දවසක් ගත වෙනවා. ප්‍රොසෙස් කරනකොට තව දවසක් ගත වෙනවා. ඊළඟ දවසේදී මේක ලබා ගැනීමට හැකි වෙන පරිදි යථා තත්ත්වයට ස්ට්‍රීම්ලයින් කරන්න තමයි බලාපොරොත්තු වෙන්නේ.
Meanwhile, the Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation of the University of Washington predicts that the total number of daily COVID-19 deaths in Sri Lanka will surpass the 200 mark by mid-June. Further, they also predict that the total COVID-19 death toll in the country will surpass 8,000 during the same period. During yesterday, Sri Lanka reported 15 COVID-19 deaths. However, the Institute's prediction for yesterday was 45 COVID fatalities in Sri Lanka. What's more, the total death toll as of last night stood at only 801 in the island, when the institution's prediction was 1,699. Meanwhile, the daily recoveries from COVID-19 once again crossed the 1,000 mark today and stood at 1,148. With that, the country's total number of recoveries since the first wave increased to 105,611. In the meantime, 1,581 positive COVID-19 infections were confirmed during the day, bringing the number of active cases in the island to 21,075. On the vaccination front, over 1,200 people in the area of Kudabudgamo in Angola received the first dose of the Sputnik 5 vaccine during the day. People residing in the areas of Buralla and Sudubella in Maradana too were inoculated with the Sinopharm jab.
මීට අමතරව මෙම මධ්‍යස්ථාන ප්‍රමාණය තවත් වැඩි කරන්නට ශ්‍රී ලංකා යුද හමුදාවේ සහයෝගය ඇතුව යුද හමුදාව විසින් අපිට අවශ්‍ය කරන සියලුම වෛද්‍යවරුන් කාර්ය මණ්ඩලය ඒ සියල්ලම ලබා දෙනවා. ඔවුන් විසින් අද 2:00 සිට කොළඹ නගරයේ ජීවත් වෙන සියලුම දෙනාට සහ කොළඹ නගරයේ රාජකාරි සඳහා ඇවිල්ලා මෙහි රාජකාරි කරන අයටත් ලබා ගන්නට පුළුවන්. එන්නත ප්‍රධානතම හේතුවක් වෙලා තියෙනවා අද කොළඹ නගරය තුලින් මේ රෝගීන්ගේ වාර්තා වීම අඩු කර ගන්නට.
What's more, people in 4 areas that fall under the purview of the Gampa Municipal Council were also vaccinated against COVID-19 using the Sinopharm vaccine. The immunization program was worked off in some other areas in the island as well. 1,200 people belonging to 4 Gramaninadari divisions in Panudara and several state officials of the Karutara district received their first dose of the Sinopharm vaccine. Further, 250 persons, including vendors and employees of the Migoda Economic Centre too, received the Sinopharm jab, while state officials involved in providing essential services in the Piliandala town were also inoculated. Meanwhile, health authorities continue to encourage people to opt for vaccination conducted in Sri Lanka using the Oxford AstraZeneca, Sinopharm and the Sputnik 5 jabs.
මේ එන්නත් වර්ග තුනෙන්ම COVID-19ට එරෙහිව අවශ්‍ය ආරක්ෂාව ලැබෙන නිසා අපි ජනතාවගෙන් ඉල්ලා සිටින්නේ තමුන්ට ලැබෙන එන්නත තමයි හොඳම එන්නත. ඒ එන්නත ඒ අවස්ථාවේදී පාවිච්චි කරන්න. මේ අවස්ථාවේදී එන්නත ලබා නොගෙන හිටියොත් නැවත ආපහු එන්නත දීමේදී ගැටලුකාරී තත්ත්වයක් මතුවෙන්න පුළුවන්. මොකද අපි රටම ආවරණය කරමින් මුළු රට පුරාම එන්නත් කරන වැඩසටහන ක්‍රියාත්මක කරද්දී එකම දිස්ත්‍රික්කයක් ඉලක්ක කරමින් දිගින් දිගටම අපිට එන්නත් කරන වැඩසටහන ක්‍රියාත්මක කරන්න බෑ. කිසිම එන්නතක් කල් ඉක්ුත් වී නැහැ. කල්ලිකුතු කිසිම එන්නතක් හෝ කිසිම ඖෂධයක් සෞඛ්‍ය අමාත්‍යාංශය තුල භාවිතා කරන්නේ නැහැ. කිසිම දවසක ඒ වගේ දෙයක් සිදු නොවන බවට සහතික කරන්න පුළුවන්.
Meanwhile, yesterday a decision was taken by the Committee on COVID-19 to expand the vaccination drive that is currently worked off in the Western Province to other districts in the country as well. In the meantime, the Sri Lankan College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists says that expectant mothers are exposed to a severe risk of COVID-19 as 2 mothers have already succumbed to the virus. Speaking at a media briefing, its president Dr. Pradeep De Silva said that the main strategy to reduce the number of deaths is via inoculating expectant mothers.
මේ මොහොත වෙනකොටත් ගැබිනි මරණ දෙකක් පමණ වෙලා තියෙනවා. තව එක්කෙනෙක්ට ඉතා අසාධ්‍යයි. තවත් ඉදිරියට ඒ වැඩිම වෙන්න පුළුවන්. ඒක වළක්වා ගැනීමට කරන්න පුළුවන් ප්‍රධාන උපක්‍රමයක් තමයි එන්නත්කරණය. අපේ අනුබද්ධ රාජකීය වෛද්‍යවරුන්ගේ ආයතනය තියෙනවා මහා බ්‍රිතාන්‍යයේ. ඒකේ කියලා තියෙනවා දැන් මෙච්චර කාලයකට දීලා තියෙනවා කිසිම කෙනෙක්ට සංකූලතාවයක් මේක නිසා ඇති වෙලා නැහැ. බබෙක්ටවත් මවකටවත්. එම නිසා එන්නත්කරණය සුදුසුයි ප්‍රෙග්නන්ට් අයට, ප්‍රෙග්නන්ට් වෙන්න බලාපොරොත්තු වෙච්ච අයට, ඒ වගේම කිරිදෙන මව්වරුන්ට.
He added that if there is a shortage of vaccines, immunization of expectant mothers should start in main districts.
මේ අවස්ථාවේදී ලංකාවේ ගැමිණි කාන්තාවන් ඇති 1,50,000ක් පමණ. මගේ පෞද්ගලික මතය සියලුම ගැමිණි කාන්තාවන්ට දෙන්න ඕන. ඒත් එන්නත් පිළිබඳ මොනවා හරි අඩුපාඩුවක් තියෙනවා නම් අපිට ප්‍රධාන දිස්ත්‍රික්ක 4 කොළඹ, ගම්පහ, ගාල්ල, නුවර වහාම එන්නත්කරණය පටන් ගන්න ඕන.
In the meantime, the President's Media Division says that the 1.36 billion rupee balance in the COVID-19 Healthcare and Social Security Fund will be put towards the immunisation program in the island. It said that from an accumulated sum of 1.75 billion rupees, 391 million rupees, which is 23%, has been spent. It added that the only contributions to the fund came from the people, several local institutions and Sri Lankan expatriates, insisting that international monetary institutions or organisations have not contributed to the COVID-19 Healthcare and Social Security Fund. The PMD's statement went on to say that though contributions flowed into the fund in 2020, it only received 7 million rupees this year until April. While repelling fake news in circulation about the fund, the PMD said that its audit is handed over to the National Audit Office. Now, police media spokesperson DIG Ajit Rohana says that a special operation will be conducted tonight to nab people who violate the quarantine law by organising parties and other mass gatherings. In addition, DIG Rohana announced that 351 persons were arrested yesterday for not wearing face masks and maintaining social distancing in public.
Yesterday, 351 persons have been arrested in connection with the offences of face mask and social distancing. Tonight, we are going to conduct a special operations, especially in the places where the parties or any other public events are conducted. It is strictly prohibited, and if any person violates the quarantine rules and regulations, they are dealt with the law, they would be arrested, and the vehicles that are used for that particular offence would be taken into police custody. And finally, the charges are framed against them under the quarantine law, and in addition to that, under the criminal law as well.
The United Arab Emirates has announced the suspension of entry for travellers from 4 countries, including Sri Lanka, on national and foreign flights. The National Emergency Crisis and Disaster Management Authority made the announcement today, with Bangladesh, Pakistan and Nepal being the other 3 countries coming under the move. The suspension is effective from 11:59 p.m. on Wednesday, the 12th of May. Transit flights are suspended as well, with the exception of those travelling to the UAE and bound for the 4 said countries. Cargo flights, however, are not affected. Further, flights between the 4 countries will continue to allow the transport of passengers from the UAE to Bangladesh, Pakistan, Nepal and Sri Lanka, and the transfer of exempted groups from these countries to the UAE who have applied for exemption. The only exemption are UAE citizens, diplomatic missions, official delegations, golden visa holders and businessmen's jets. Exempted passengers will need to undergo a PCR test no more than 48 hours before the flight, and they must undergo a PCR test upon arrival in the UAE. They must also undergo a 10-day quarantine in the UAE with PCR tests on days 4 and 8 of entry. What's more, travellers coming from the 4 countries via other countries are required to provide proof of a period of stay in those countries of no less than 14 days in order to be allowed to enter the UAE. Dilma Tea founder and philanthropist Meryl J. Fernando believes that Sri Lanka's tourism sector can look forward to brighter days as soon as the COVID-19 restrictions are gradually lowered, and says that the current tourism administration remains dynamic enough to take advantage of the opportunities available. Fernando made these comments in discussion with Indivari Amuwatha on our current affairs program at Hyde Park on AdaDerana 24 as he celebrates 71 years of brand building in Ceylon tea this year.
Entrepreneur and philanthropist Meryl J. Fernando, a figure best known for his contribution to taking Ceylon tea to international heights under his Dilma brand, he believes that Sri Lanka's tourism sector can look forward to a significant bounce back once COVID-19 is brought under control and the shackles holding international travellers back are shed. He added that despite offering his expertise and advice on how to reform the country's tourism sector, focusing on streamlining investment and promotion into the sector, it fell on deaf ears during previous administrations.
How do we replicate this success in branding Sri Lanka to retain that essence?
Well, I was on the Sri Lanka Tourist Board and there were 15 members on the board. So I know if there are 15 members on a board, nothing will work. Opinions are expressed. Ultimate decision is not right. I submitted a proposal to the minister. Break this up into 5 subcommittees. One to handle marketing and promotion. Other team to advise the board on opportunities in tourism. For example, there are sites all over the country. You should not have to get people to come and say, I have this place, can you develop? I said, you should identify those. And when an investor comes, they go to their team, he will say, these are the things we have, and this is what we propose to you. So that each one studies particular aspects. And I said, have department, great idea, nothing happened. Now, tourist board is quite dynamic. This COVID upset tourism, but I'm sure when all these COVID restrictions disappear, tourism will bounce back in a big way because people are waiting now to get out of their homes on a holiday. That is true. And I had given a plan to promote Sri Lankan Airlines, tourism and tea. Put the 3 budgets together instead of getting each budget spent separately. That we have massive budget and 2 things. That proposal was with the previous administration.
Welcome back. This is First at 9. Now, Sri Lanka today signed a new framework agreement with South Korea, which will see the island being furnished with concessional loans to the tune of $500 million. Development Cooperation Fund of the Export-Import Bank of Korea. The new framework arrangement is for the period of 2020 to 2022, and the money will be used to finance projects mutually agreed. The Minister of Finance said that the interest rate on this concessional loan is as low as 0.15% to 0.2%, and it has a repayment period of about 40 years with a grace period of 10 years. It added that the 2 sides agreed to continue the Korean Exim Bank Representative Office, which was opened in Colombo in January 2016 by its chairman, to further implement the projects in a well-coordinated manner. The framework agreement was signed by Treasury Secretary S.R. Atigala and Ambassador of the Republic of Korea, Woon Jin-yong. Now, taking a look at the Colombo Bourse, Sri Lankan shares closed lower today, weighed by financial, industrial and consumer staple stocks as a jump in domestic COVID-19 cases dented investor sentiment. The CSE All Share Price Index fell 1.47% to end at 7,135.8 points, having climbed at 5.34% this year, while the S&P SL 20 index of more liquid stocks fell 1.19% or 34.33 points to close at 2,841.31. Now here's Dimantha Mathi with a brief report on today's market performance.
So we are seeing a continued rise in number of COVID-19 patients, and it is affecting the market. So we saw towards the end of last week that the number of patients were within the 2,000 mark, but yesterday's number exceeding 2,500 had a negative impact on the confidence levels of the investors. So with that, from the start of the day, we saw a bit of a downtrend in the market, and the selling pressure was there some, especially among retail investors, with some panic selling and some rumors of a possible lockdown. Both of these factors affecting the confidence of the market. Overall, we saw a 106-point drop during the day, with the index falling to around 7,135 points. So we are continuing to see that the index is hovering around the current level, 7,200 levels, up and down below that. So we are seeing this volatility for the last couple of weeks at the moment. Also, if we take the market, we saw turnover levels exceeding 2 billion, 2.4 billion during the day, and if we take the number of trades, also 18,000 trades. So we are seeing moderate retail activity taking place during the day.
As hospitals in Indian capital New Delhi struggles with low oxygen supplies, help is on the way in the form of an oxygen express train carrying 224 tons of liquid oxygen arriving in the city, a life-saving measure that seeks to save countless infected patients thronging for treatment. Meanwhile, Japan has cancelled a planned lifting of its restrictions as cases have surged across 14 prefectures, setting new records for daily cases.
An oxygen express train carrying oxygen tankers from India's western Gujarat state arrived at the Indian capital of New Delhi today. The train pulled into Delhi Kant railway station with 11 cryogenic tankers carrying 224 tons of liquid oxygen, which will be dispatched to Delhi, Uttar Pradesh and Haryana states. India's rampaging second wave of COVID-19 continues to send patients in the country's overburdened hospitals, facing acute shortages of beds and medical oxygen. International aid has poured into India in response to the crisis, as the country's health system struggles to cope under the weight of surging COVID-19 cases. India's daily rise in cases retreated from the 400,000 mark today, while its daily rise in deaths also fell after 2 straight days of more than 4,000 fatalities. Meanwhile, in spite of the intensified prevention and control efforts, Japan is still racking up COVID-19 cases like never before. Japan reported more than 7,000 new COVID-19 cases on Saturday for the first time since January, with 14 prefectures setting new highs. Japanese Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga said on Friday the government is extending the state of emergency in Tokyo, Osaka, Hyogo and Kyoto until the end of May, while expanding it to Aichi and the Fukuoka prefectures. The emergency state was initially set to be eased tomorrow. The country imported 28 million doses of the COVID-19 vaccine since February, but has so far inoculated only 2.2% of its population, with the remaining 24 million doses sitting in freezers. In the meantime, police dispersed hundreds of people partying for a second night in Barcelona after Spain lifted at midnight yesterday a 6-month curfew aimed at curbing the COVID-19 spread. Near the central Arc de Triomphe monument, revelers drank and danced maskless with little to no social distance to the beat of music blasted from loudspeakers. Similar scenes in streets and beaches in different Spanish towns and cities have sparked outrage among some members of the population and concern from politicians and the medical and scientific community. While the curfew has been lifted, most regions have kept limits on opening hours for bars and restaurants, forcing people onto the streets.
Now in cricket, an independent anti-corruption tribunal has unanimously cleared former Sri Lanka cricketer Avishka Gunawardena of 2 charges against him under the Emirates Cricket Board's anti-corruption code. It allows him to resume participation in cricket with immediate effect. Gunawardena was charged with Article 214 directly or indirectly soliciting, inducing, enticing, instructing, persuading, encouraging or intentionally facilitating any participation to breach Code Article 2.1. He was also charged with Article 245, failing to disclose to the Anti-Corruption Unit full details of any incident, fact or matter that comes to the attention of a participant that may evidence corrupt conduct under the Anti-Corruption Code by another participant. And that's it from all of us here at First at 9. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.